how do you guys at Green Juju ensure that the freeze-dried raw is safe to handle?
Well, we do two, when you go into manufacturing, there are many steps along the way. So there's, keeping the temperature of the mix where the food is mixed below a certain temperature in the room, to mitigate pathogen growth. There's all these different steps, but the main two steps we use are high pressure processing as well as test and hold. So the high pressure processing is a very effective way of eliminating Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria. And test and hold is great because you can take an actual sample of the actual product and then you can hold it, obviously, until it goes out.
So that means that we hold the product until we get the test results back, so that when we ship something, we have test results saying that it's clear of Salmonella, Listeria, and E. coli before it hits stores.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that. Can you explain a little bit more about about HPP? Because it is quite controversial, and just so that people get a full understanding, because a lot of pet parents are under the impression that HPP is not good. So maybe we can just clear up that confusion there.
I'm gonna say a little thing before I let you go into it, but
Sure.
Billy and I have both been in this industry for quite a while. We've, seen the HPP conversations come up over the years, and at one point we were both on the other side of this. And I think before we made this food, we looked at our options for food safety and how we wanted to approach this. And we were we were not set on making this food. If we didn't find something that we liked and that we felt good about and that we wanted to move forward with, I think now that we're in it and we love the food so much, it's hard to even believe that we were at this point. But at one point we were just like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And so we went into learning about HPP with open minds. And what we learned was that the HPP of 10 to 12 years ago that we were so against was a really old technology, and so much has changed. So if we were still HPPing the way we did 10 to 12 years ago, it wouldn't have the effects that we want it to have now. But since so much has changed in the technology, and again, as Billy's mentioned a couple of times, it's manufacturer to manufacturer how you do any certain process. But how we have learned to do the HPP process to preserve the food and to keep it intact like we want it to is something that we're proud of and we feel really good about. And so we've been able to kind of go on this journey together and see the other side of things. So I'll leave Billy to explain the details on that.
Yeah, I think I was like, oh, wherever did you hear that it was bad? So
it was him, to be specific.
So yeah, it was an interesting thing. I'll start this by saying, for my own personal journey with this, the first thing you have to realize about what we do is in science is if you ever ignore a piece of data because you don't want to be wrong, then you're not practicing science. And so being wrong is a big part of that. I know that in my own personal journey, things I thought were true about many subjects, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I've just evolved in that process where I was wrong about X or, whatever it might be through that process. So for me, it started in an HPP facility, and I was under the impression that the amount of pressure created heat to the point where it would cook the food. And I remember watching the process and looking at the temperature gauge monitor, and the temperature went from 41 to 43 degrees in that process. And I said, oh, I was wrong about that. And then it sparked me to think, what else was I wrong about? And so I went down probably a more extensive journey than any human outside of some of the PhDs I talked to in the technology has gone through, having meetings with several different PhDs in the technology, and also going to the specific conference on high pressure processing and freeze drying, which you can imagine was very exciting. But also in looking at some data from some other companies that has come out specifically on raw food itself, most of the studies done, which you can take data from this, but most of the studies that are done are from other industries. So I was in Massachusetts last week and I was getting some green juice at Whole Foods, and that green juice is high pressure processed. And so it's going to have a different effect on that juice than it is, say, on raw meat. And they're going to do it for a different amount of time. A good example of that is there's a study that shows that HPP can oxidize the fats in products, but that study was done. The food itself was HPP for at least 20 minutes, and that's when the oxidizing resulted. Ours is done for 180 seconds. So that's not relevant to what we're doing, right? But I think the real crux of the issue is, and how you can kind of make people understand generally, is what do we look for in raw food? We know that the enzymes are still active and not really affected. The most any study saw was by 10%. And you'll get enzyme loss even in freezing, right? So you're never going to be at exactly 100% there. We know that the background flora survives. Now, what that means is, the other argument you'll hear is it kills the good bacteria. What is good bacteria? So there's nothing that's defined as a probiotic in meat, but there is background flora, which may interact with other flora, that kind of thing. And we know through a study that was done on probiotics and HPP food, where they're actually putting a probiotic serum onto raw food and then HPPing it, that those survived that process. So we know it's effective at reducing pathogens, but also maintaining that background flora. The digestibility when tested is exactly the same. That doesn't change at all. And that's another factor I would sort of measure that by. And the other thing I would measure by is the nutrient profile. Then there's two interesting things. There are 3 nutrients that the pressure will reduce by up to 20%. That's the biggest reduction they've seen. It's vitamin A and 2 B vitamins. Now, a good example of that is, if you're using a formulation like ours, the B vitamins and our vitamin A are so much higher than the AFCO minimum anyway, that even a reduction of that's not really good. You can account for that in formulation. But also, 67% of the nutrients were shown to be more bioavailable, meaning they actually showed up as more on a nutrient test, which it's an interesting thing. So I don't know why. My own theory is that when you apply that pressure, it's kind of like when you ferment something, those bacteria kind of like eat the vitamin and kind of open it up to more digestibility. That's my theory, is that something like that happens, but you actually are getting, arguably more nutrients out of that food. And so when you add all these things up together, what you get is, a really benign process. So it's as benign as any of the other processes people are using to mitigate pathogens. And that was a huge turnaround for me. I was the voice of all of the arguments that I now am saying, like, oh, there's data that shows that's wrong. And that's totally okay. In my mind, that's just growth. And back to Kelley's point, I would never make a food that I wouldn't feel comfortable feeding to my own dog. That to me is crazy. And so when we started to do this and we're using high pressure processing, we made sure we were 150% comfortable with that process. And I would say the biggest credit to that is, so I love data, like just generally, but I love the data points we can get from testing the food. I love it when we can get it from like formulation software and all these things that we use to make sure that this is, complete balance. But the real best testable data in my mind is real world use of this food. So the food's been out for over a year now, and we are just getting such great results back from people who are actually using it as the sole diet, as a topper, as 50% of the diet, whatever, we get everywhere in between. And so I've been just so happy with the results we've been getting with both dogs and cats, that's what tells me the best story. Is this a good food? It's an amazing food because it produces amazing results.
Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you liked it, please do make sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel because it really, really does help with the growth of our channel.
And helping more dogs.